latest episode of Vijf Vragen, or 5 Questions as we would say in English. This is our new video podcast featuring the people who are at the heart of the Netherlands' diplomatic network here in the US. We're talking with the diplomats and policy officers about the strong bonds between the United States and the Netherlands, as well as our diplomatic work here in the United States. We'll focus on our cultural and economic ties that go back more than 400 years. And we'll talk about the collaborations between our two countries that make our relationship a partnership that works. I'm Jeff Alenak from the Embassy's Communications Office, and I'm here with Renske Heemskerk, whose work focuses on the education and science policy of the Netherlands. Thank you for joining me today, Renske.
Thank you, Jeff.
Great. Well, let's jump right in with the first question. What's your background, and how did you wind up here at the Embassy?
I was born and raised in The Hague in the Netherlands, and after my Dutch high school, I spent a year here in the US, the high school in a tiny village called Wiscasset in Maine, and I had a wonderful year.
Were you there the whole year?
I did a whole year. I was a senior in high school, so I had it all, the prom and all the sports and the graduation.
How about the snow? Was there a lot of snow?
There was a lot of snow. We had snow days. We had days off also.
There's snow days in Maine?
We had snow days in Maine.
I wouldn't have thought that.
And then you were off from school, but often the days were good enough to go skiing. So those were fun days too. And it was actually my first, the year I spent in the US was the first time that I went to the US and that I also went outside of Europe. So I lived with an American host family there, and they became my American family. And since then I have been back to the US almost every year. So it became my second home. I studied at the University of Amsterdam, International Relations, and spent a semester at Boston College, studying in Boston. I moved on to work for an NGO, the European Center for Conflict Prevention, focusing on conflict prevention and peace building, working 5 years with other international organizations worldwide on this issue, organizing a large conference at the UN headquarters in New York, meeting lots of people also from embassies around the world. Then I moved on working for an agency in the Netherlands focusing on education, internationalization within higher education and vocational education. So that brought my path on the educational track. And after working there, I started working for another organization focusing on coordinating a program on honors programs within the Netherlands and building up a large network within the Netherlands with higher education institutions, both research and universities of applied sciences. And 6 years ago, I started working for the Ministry of Education, Culture and Science in The Hague, with my main focus on innovation within education, but also on internationalization. A year ago, a new policy came out focusing on international knowledge and talent strategy, and this position of education and science attaché was part of that new policy, and I applied for the job and was appointed.
And
so
here you are.
That brought me to Washington.
Well, what first sparked your interest in education and science?
I just enjoyed my education, so I think my connotation with education is a positive feeling, a positive energy. And as Nelson Mandela once said, the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world is education. And I do believe that. So I do think it's really important that everyone has access to education and access to know what's out there in the world. And I think the higher education sector is really lively, energetic, and innovative. And for me, it's always been a pleasure to meet eager students, teachers, and academics who work with a passion on whatever subject or theme and make education better and accessible and eventually make the world a better place. So I think that sparked my interest for education and science.
Okay. Now, not only are you new to the embassy, but your position is new as well. Before you arrived, we didn't have someone whose sole focus was on education and science. Why is now the right time for someone to do your job in the US?
Good question. I think the US has been an important partner for the Netherlands for many, many years in the scientific world, both when it comes to research cooperation as well as knowledge exchange. But as I mentioned, this new policy came out, and I think it just came together that way. This new position allows me to focus more on strategic partnerships here within the US, and also with a focus on policy learning. So what can we learn from how the Americans deal with issues such as knowledge security, but also reward and recognition when it comes to different career paths within education and science, but also on issues such as diversity and inclusion. And I think those issues are high on the agenda both here and in the Netherlands. And it's I think, a very interesting task to facilitate that dialogue on both sides of the ocean to understand and learn from each other. Also, we have many Dutch academics here working in the US. And to facilitate a more structural exchange between those academics. A recently new network came about. It's called the Dutch Network for Academics in the US, DNA US, and it was launched during the visit of our minister and our queen in September to Berkeley. And that will also be one of my tasks here to actually build the network and facilitate the dialogue.
And what is the goal of that? Is it?
It has various goals. So first of all, it's just to get a more structural cooperation between the academics, but also for young academics, it's sometimes really difficult to know how things are done in a new place. So older professors could help the younger ones. So we are thinking of maybe setting up a mentor system. Also, we would like to have a more structured dialogue with these academics concerning the different policy issues. So we get to know from them what the discourse is here in the US and how we can learn from that in the Netherlands. And another goal is also when we have incoming visitors, we know where to go and what the specific themes are. So there are different goals that we're trying to reach with this network.
Since you are the first diplomat who focuses on Dutch education and science policy here in the States, there is no established network of academics and scientists between our two nations. How do you go about building one?
As mentioned, the recently set up of the DNA US, so the Dutch Network for Academics in the US, is a start when it comes to academic cooperation. And besides facilitating that network, I've started to connect with other education and science attachés here at other embassies in DC. I've also reaching out to government officials at the State Department, Department of Education, but also reaching out to counterparts such as the NSF and ACE, so the Associations of Universities and the National Science Foundation. And then within the embassy, I'm working closely with the innovation attachés because they have been building relationships in the field of science already for numerous years, so we can work together in that area. And also, I've started to contact lots of the universities here in DC also to just connect with them. They're just around the corner, so for me it would be really interesting to meet with them and to hear what issues are on their agenda. So in essence, it's lots of networking and building relationships and also taking the time, I think, and invest in those relationships.
What will you need to accomplish before you consider your job done?
Also a good question, and as I've been here for 3 months,
that's
a very good question. I'm happy that I'm going to have more years ahead of me, so I hope to be here for hopefully 3 and maybe 4 years.
Okay.
Also depending on what my family wants, but so far so good. We've settled in quite good. I think one of them is building a network of relevant actors, both at the government level and both at the higher education institutions, organizations, and the university itself. Also, to have a better understanding of the topics that are on the agenda here within the higher education and science sector, and how we can actually learn from that at the Dutch policy making process. And furthermore, I really hope also to work with the different colleagues here within the embassy. We have lots of colleagues from different ministries here, and we all have our own tasks and mandates. And I think it would be great if we can add value to each other's work to accomplish even more in all those interesting areas we are working in. And on a personal note, I just hope to find my way easy in DC, because for me it's still not easy to find my way around. But I hope after 3 years it's going to be like The Hague for me.
Do you mean like logistically?
Everything logistically, but also just figuring out where to go, and if people come by, where to take them, and just feel at home in a new city. Yeah.
Okay. I have one more bonus question for you that'll be somewhat of a surprise. You mentioned your time in Maine. You spent a year up there in Maine when you were a senior in high school?
Well, I finished my high school in the Netherlands, so I was 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're down here in the DC area, which is really kind of like the Chesapeake Bay area. And the Chesapeake Bay, of course, is known for blue crabs, whereas Maine might be known for lobster.
Yes.
So if you were at a party and you had to choose between Maine lobster or blue crabs smothered in Old Bay seasoning, which would you pick?
Ooh, I think I would choose the lobster.
The lobster?
Yeah.
You know, you're saying that to a Maryland native.
I know. Yeah, but I still think, maybe you can combine them, the crab and the lobster. Yeah.
Blue crab and lobster dipped in the same
dipped in
Old
the same.
Bay?
Yeah.
Have you had Old Bay?
No, so I still have to try it. And then maybe if you ask me the question again, maybe I will have a different answer.
That's why, because you haven't had Old Bay.
Yes.
It's required if you're in Maryland that you have Old Bay. So you're close enough. I can make that happen for you.
Good.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you again, Renske, for joining me for this episode of Vijf Vragen, though I might have asked more than 5 questions again. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please tell us what you think in the comments below. And be sure to click on the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode or the other videos we post on our YouTube channel. I'll be back behind the microphone next month with another member of the Dutch Diplomatic Network in the United States. Until then, you can keep up with our work on any of our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Just search for NL in the USA, and you can stay up to date on how the United States and the Netherlands have a partnership that works.